from 2 Corinthians, 2nd chapter, beginning with the first verse. So I made up my mind not to make you another painful visit. For if I cause you pain, who is there to make me glad when the one whom I have pained? And I wrote as I did, so that when I came, I might not suffer pain from those who should have made me rejoice. For I am confident about all of you, that my joy would be the joy of all of you. For I wrote you out of much distress and anguish of heart, and with many tears, not to cause you pain, but to let you know the abundant love that I have for you. For if anyone has caused pain, he has caused it not to me, but to some extent, not to exaggerate it, to all of you. This punishment by the majority is enough for such a person. So now instead of you should forgive and console him, so that he may not be overwhelmed by excessive sorrow. So I urge you to reaffirm your love for him. I wrote for this reason, to test you, and to know whether you are obedient in everything. And anyone whom you forgive, I also forgive. What I have forgiven, if I have forgiven anything, has been for your sake in the presence of Christ.
Lily Tomlin said, "Forgiveness means giving up all hope for a better past." Forgiveness means giving up all hope for a better past. Well, yeah. How many times have I held on to an offense when somebody did what I called a wrong, all because I really didn't want it to work out that way? And I really look back and say, I don't like this. I want it to be better. I want it to be okay. I want what happened not to have happened. But it did. Another writer commenting on forgiveness is Archbishop Desmond Tutu from South Africa. When the Black National Party took over South Africa after experiencing the atrocities and horrors of apartheid for many, many years, people in the nation of South Africa, particularly Afrikaners, and even the rest of the world, were extremely concerned that when the Black National Party took over as leaders of South Africa, they would retaliate for all the atrocities, the injustice, the brutality, and the horrors of living under a white regime in South Africa. But the Black National Party, with Nelson Mandela, Bishop Tutu, put together a group called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It was a very strange organization. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, they made an agreement that if you or someone who had committed an atrocity against someone as a part of apartheid, if you would come before the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and not merely acknowledge that you had committed atrocities, but be willing to be clear and specific about the pain and brutality you caused other people, that if you would fully open yourself and acknowledge what you did, you would be forgiven. Bishop Tutu writes, "To forgive is not just to be altruistic. It is the best form of self-interest. It is also a process that does not exclude hatred and anger. Those emotions are all a part of being human. You should never hate yourself for hating others who do terrible things. The depth of your love is shown by the extent of your anger. However, when I talk of forgiveness, I mean the belief that you can come out on the other side a better person. A better person than the one being consumed by anger and hatred. Remaining in that state locks you in a state of victimhood, making you almost dependent on the perpetrator. If you can find it in yourself to forgive, then you are no longer chained to the perpetrator. You can move on, and you can even help the perpetrator to become a better person as well. I know you've all deeply appreciated last Sunday and today and for a couple more weeks a sermon series on 2 Corinthians. As I said last week, I know you've just all been saying, when is somebody going to preach on that great letter of the Apostle Paul, 2 Corinthians? When is somebody finally going to get to that? Absolutely my favorite. I read it 4 times a day. Well, okay, maybe some of us have never read it. But it's in that Bible somewhere. There are a couple of great verses in there that we might know about, but on the whole, not much. But here we are, 2 Corinthians, 2nd chapter, and Paul is writing this church at Corinth, and it's fascinating. Paul probably had the most contentious relationship with this church at Corinth as any of his churches. Now, I'd like to think of the Apostle Paul as this great faith leader. Somebody who started churches, proclaimed the good news of Jesus Christ, God's love for all people, and got along with everybody. But that really wasn't Paul. He fussed and fought with people, but especially the church at Corinth. He had promised the church that even though they were upset with him, he was going to come to them personally and try to work this out. Then he backed out on his promise. And they weren't happy with him. So that's today's lesson that we read. Yeah, I was going to come to you, but I thought it would be better just to write. Okay, Paul, that's pretty wishy-washy. Well, he tries to make it not, but okay, he's human. But then, apparently, somebody in the church at Corinth had mistreated Paul personally in front of a lot of people. Well, we don't know what happened, but it probably was some guy, and who knows what he did. And maybe he said, well, Paul, you're not really an apostle or a follower of Jesus, and you're really a nobody. Or to quote somebody, you're a loser. And so Paul said, what you need to do is know that this person has suffered enough. Now you should forgive and console him. What Paul's really saying is you should forgive this man and stand beside him. Stand with him. That's what the word console means. Stand with. All right, thanks a lot, Paul. Not only are we supposed to forgive, but we're supposed to stand with this person. Now, don't misunderstand. If you are in an abusive relationship and someone is abusing you, that doesn't mean you're supposed to forgive them and stay with them. Because standing with or standing beside someone is not just physical presence. We can stand with someone and not be in a daily relationship with them. I know that's hard to do, but we can do it. Forgive and stand with them. I called called this the challenge of forgiveness because I think forgiveness is a challenge. I stumbled across reference to some writings by a woman known as Melissa A. Miller. And she wrote a chapter in the book Restorative Justice and Conflict Transformation Manual. And this is a quote I found from another pastor. But Ms. Miller talks about several myths of forgiveness. Myth 1, forgiving means forgetting. Well, now this is not quite the way she says it, but just to put it another way, baloney. Where we ever got this notion, well, I think I know where we got the notion. Forgiveness means forgetting. We want to say, okay, if I forgive, then I don't have to think about it anymore. I don't have to remember how badly I hurt. I don't have to remember how horribly I was treated. I just want to let go of all that. But Miss Miller says, we don't truly forgive unless we are willing to remember. Myth number 2, forgiving means accepting the offense. Well, now this is not exactly how she says it, but just to put it another way, baloney. Forgiving does not mean condoning bad behavior. Forgiving does not mean condoning abuse, mistreatment, people's behavior that causes hurt and pain. That's not what forgiving does. Forgiving doesn't say, oh, whatever you do is okay. Forgiving means even though you did this, I am choosing to forgive. Myth number 3. I don't get this one, but anyway, she says myth number 3, forgiving is automatic. Well, now this is not the way she says it, but just to say it another way, baloney. If someone hurts me, I want to hurt them back. If someone hurts me, my tendency is to say, okay, you hurt me, now I'm going to hurt you 5 times as much. You hurt me, now I'm going to make you pay. That's the automatic response. In her writing, she says, we need some time, we need some reflection in order to be able to decide to forgive. Forgiving's not automatic. Forgiving is a choice. Myth number 4, and I think we buy into this myth. Forgiving is a quick, one-time event. Now again, this is not the way she says it, but just to put it another way, baloney. Now, we want it to be that way. Oh, okay, I forgive you. We're done. Forgiving is an ongoing process that unfortunately goes on and on and on. I don't know about you, but sometimes I think, oh, I forgave them a long time ago. Man, mad about that. So I have to do it some more. And just keep doing it. Myth number 5. Forgiving means the relationship is reconciled. Well, now this is not the way she says it. Just put it another way. Baloney. We wanted to say, okay, I forgive you, everything's okay, right? No. Forgiving may only be the beginning of rebuilding a relationship, and who knows what a rebuilt relationship is going to look like. Again, standing with someone does not mean literally being in their presence on a daily basis. It means that we are choosing to love them. In fact, Paul in this letter goes on to say, choose the way of love. Perhaps Brene Brown says it in a helpful way. She talks about in some of her research when she was trying to figure out how to deal with this forgiveness, that she realized that forgiveness means we have to be willing to grieve. Which gets at that Lily Tomlin quote, that forgiving means giving up a hope for a better past. Brene Brown says forgiving is grieving because we have to let something die. We don't want to do that. At least I don't. I want everything to always be okay all the time. Challenge of forgiveness. I don't know why, but I began to think about directionality as I thought about forgiveness. Directionality. Why did you think about that, John? I have no clue. Directionality. We understand direction. Direction is forwards or backwards. Up, down, north, south, east, west, in, out. But there's no real proper direction, is there? I mean, sometimes going backwards is even more important than going forward. Well, we know that. If you get ready to run the brick wall, backing up is probably the preferred way to go. We understand. So I began to think about, okay, if there's no really right forever and ever direction, what about time? Does time only have one direction? Well, yeah, time's always going forward. Time's always moving into the future. You can't turn the calendar back, John. You can't turn the clock back. So does time always go one direction? And yet, does it really? Because I can remember what happened a few days ago or a few years ago. And sometimes I even remember accurately. And I can re-story what happened. I can re-narrate it. And sometimes I can even re-historize what happened. So in some ways I can go back in time. Does time always go forward? I don't know, but I had this wonderful opportunity to go to Spain a couple of weeks ago. And when it was afternoon there, you all were just waking up. Now, I mean, I knew stuff you all didn't know before you didn't know it. Yeah. But then, I got to come back. And when I came back, I gave up 7 hours. Oh. So, what is the direction of time? And I asked that because I was thinking about the concept of pay it forward. Now, I found a little anecdote about Benjamin Franklin. Talked about pay it forward. He said to someone to whom he'd loaned some money, he said, I know you're ready to repay me, but don't repay me. Instead, I want you to look for someone else to whom you can loan the money, and then don't ask them to pay you back. But pay it forward. We think this is new because there was a movie a few years ago on Pay It Forward. This is Benjamin Franklin. 240 years ago. So I began to think, can we pay forgiveness forward? Well, yeah. I know and trust that God has been gracious to me, and therefore I understand that I'm called to be gracious to others in response to God's love for me. So, yeah, I guess I can pay forgiveness forward. Can we pay forgiveness backwards? Well, that seems pretty obvious because most of the forgiving we do is for something that happened in the past. Can we pay forgiveness backwards to someone who's died? Can I pay forgiveness backward to my father, who died in 1974? Can I pay forgiveness back to that time of that little lake in Cali County where he got so upset with me because I didn't want to take a fish off the hook? Can I pay forgiveness back? Does that have any effect? Well then, can we as a faith community offer forgiveness to another person even when the person who's hurt chooses not to forgive? Paul says in this statement we read today, anyone you forgive, I forgive. Oh, so Paul shows up and he finds out that the person A here has severely beaten person B. He didn't know about it until he got there, and he says, oh, person A, you're horrible, horrible, horrible. And suddenly person B, who was the victim of the beating, he says, excuse me, Paul, I forgave him, so you have to. But what if you don't want to forgive somebody? Can I, or we, as a community of love, say, well, she won't forgive you, but we forgive you? Does it have any impact if we do that? And can we forgive into the past? I mean, all those people who committed atrocities, Stalin, can we decide now to forget Joseph Stalin for annihilating thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people? Or can we forgive into the future? Well, we don't know what the offense is yet, but we know there likely will be one. Can we today choose and decide that we're going to send our forgiveness into the future? Now, if you haven't figured out by now, in my opinion, forgiveness is complex, complicated, and convoluted. That's why I call it the challenge of forgiveness. And you may be sitting here right now saying, well, John, I've got a couple of people that I haven't forgiven, and really at this point in time I have no intention of forgiving them. Well, I only invite you to do one thing, and that's be willing to forgive yourself for not forgiving. You should forgive him and stand alongside him. Anyone you forgive, I forgive, says Paul. I found a commentator, the person who wrote the commentary, the New International Commentary on the Bible, who said that in all of Paul's 7 letters that we know for sure Paul wrote, Paul never uses the concept forgiveness of sins. And that kind of surprised me. But Paul never used that concept. In the 7 letters we know Paul wrote, Paul never used the concept forgiveness of sins. Paul is more concerned that we are made in right relationship with God, or that we are reconciled with God, and reserves the concept for forgiveness for human relationships. And I thought, well, what Paul is really after is for us to have repentance. That is, reorienting our understanding, our minds about who and what God is and how God works in our world and our lives. So, can we, you, me, as we look at what's going on in our world, terrorist attacks in Paris, San Bernardino, California, Bangladesh, Iraq. Can we offer forgiveness to those who committed such atrocities? And can we forgive the police officer who killed a black man in Minnesota? And can we forgive the black man in Minnesota who was killed? And can we forgive the police officer who shot a black man in Louisiana? And can we forgive the black man in Louisiana who was killed? And can we forgive the black man in Dallas who assassinated 5 police officers and injured several others? And can we forgive the police officers who were injured and killed in Dallas? Lily Tomlin said, forgiving means letting go of a hoped-for past. I want to try this one out. I'm wondering if forgiving means letting go of an idealized future. Forgiving means trusting that God and God's love is enough no matter what. But I'm pretty convinced that we cannot love unless we are willing to engage in the challenge of forgiveness. And Paul said, you should forgive and stand with him. Anyone you forgive, I forgive also.